But there still are older ones that are on the books because they were bonded, and it's a different animal than short-term debt that we're paying off.
Is there any pre-penalty payment?
On the long term, there is.
There is.
It's called non-callable, which means you can't really pay it off early until it gets to a certain age of the loan. And because, as Greg had mentioned, we had traditionally done the long-term bonding with the MCIA, whenever it's possible for us to, what they call that a refunding or refinance those, we've done that. So we're at the lowest possible rate for those at this point in time.
Jeanette, can you, for the benefit of the audience, explain to us for the ordinary budget that we're talking about, how much money, there's two budgets, there's the capital and there's the ordinary.
Okay.
And the capital debt that Greg alluded to and Mike and I spoke about is anywhere from 3 to 6 to $10 million, whatever we decide. And right now, the ordinary budget has to handle the deposit for that, right? You don't have.
Correct.
So what is that number?
So it's 5% of whatever the dollar amount of the projects are. So if it's, thank you.
But for the budget that we're reviewing, how much is the capital total, and how much is in the budget is the 5% amount?
It's 300. We put 375,000 in the budget for a deposit, for a down payment on that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, there were specific questions that the department heads here aren't here, so we're not
Well,
going to.
we can go through them. We can
No,
probably
let's go
answer them for you.
Yeah, I want to make 2 points. Just 2 quick points. Number one, any of the debt that we're retiring is a higher rate than we're taking on today. That's fact, virtually factual now.
Well,
Any of the debts that we're retiring is probably higher than the short-term rates that we're borrowing at today?
well, because we're retiring short-term debt, so it's probably.
Okay, so.
We're retiring
Let me
some.
word it differently. Any of the long-term debt that we're retiring is higher than
Correct.
today's rate that we're
Absolutely,
borrowing at.
yes.
And one of the big advantages of having some of the short-term debt would be that if there was a windfall that we cannot plan for, but, for example, pilot funds that should by probability be a lot greater than we can forecast, we could, if we decided to, pay down some debt with that extra money.
Only short-term debt, yes.
Correct, short-term
Yes,
debt. And that's
absolutely.
one of the advantages
Yes,
of having it as a
absolutely.
balance.
Go ahead, Mike.
So one of the, well, they were going through, there's a host of items, but they wanted basically the departments to kind of like prioritize each capital expenditure. Make a list like priority A, priority B. Right.
They're prioritized, so what you were.
Right, but like, for example, there was one of the items like they were going through, that one of the guys brought up was like, there was, there's a $2,000 office chair.
No, that's actually for about 4 office
Oh,
chairs.
so that's one.
For the
It's right,
dispatchers.
but this one-
Well, the way that, again, this is a plan, this isn't an
Right.
actual cost, these are estimates, because we don't know what it's going to be.
Because this capital budget is done probably in October, November, December of last year.
Right.
So these are quotes. So for that specific question, we need to get an ergonomic chair for one of our dispatchers.
Yeah.
That will probably be about $800 or so. We want to get every dispatcher a chair, so we put in he provided me with a quote of $2,000. So that's for hopefully 4 chairs, maybe 5, depending on when we actually get to pay for them.
Basically, how many
Yes.
dispatchers are on at once?
We have at least 2 or 3, and then we have a sergeant in there. So they need about 3 or 4 good chairs. They're sitting for most of their day.
Right, so, I'll let him finish.
Okay, I mean,
No, I'm a simple guy. I mean, I know all the technicalities, but when my office, if I want to cut, I say to my experts, cut me 10% off the capital budget.
okay, so if you look at the chief's priority list, chairs are kind of in the middle. So if we want to cut $2,000 off the capital budget, it'll probably be towards the end for, his magazines or something. So each capital expense has been prioritized by department. So as we go through this and the committee wants to cut things, we can cut from the bottom
I'm not
up.
saying we have to go cut that. I mean,
Okay.
let them cut, let each department, or you guys work with the
But could you do that?
Well,
Again,
hold on,
Yeah, and-
hold on, time out.
Okay, and
So we had a public hearing and a budget review last month.
Right.
And each department head came in and gave us a list of their capital requests, and we went through every one of them, I think, that we were here. So it's up to us to make the decision on what we'd like to, and then to Donna's point, it's been prioritized, so.
Yes.
Yes, but we never actually sat down after that. They all came in and said, this is what we
Right.
want, this is what we want. Usually what I expect to happen is, all right, now we get it back. I'm just taking for an example. Let's pick on the police. Police require, they want $500,000, whatever. And we say, that's what they asked for. But we might say, no, we don't have that money.
And that's why it says proposed amount and approved
Well,
amount.
that's what I think we should be getting on with tonight is.
Get on.
How can we do this?
I mean, I didn't get a chance to
Oh,
ask
sorry.
my questions. No, like, the police department wants silencers. I mean, I don't understand why are they Delta Force now? We're gonna do silencers? I don't understand why we need silencers.
Would you like me to answer that?
Yes.
So basically, when they do their shooting outdoors, it's silence. No, for the residents. They don't, the chief doesn't want to hear gunshots when they're out at the range, at the range, when they're outside, when they're doing outside testing and whatnot, when they're at Middletown or whatnot.
Where do they do the shooting that they are affecting residents?
Whenever they're shooting their guns off in a public space. They don't normally do outside range practice, but if they were to. I mean, the chief is here. If you want me to calm him down, I certainly can.
No, but again, I'm just Rob. I thought this was gonna be a budget workshop, and the workshop, I think, can work two ways. I think you guys did a great budget, but I think we can still cut it. Are we gonna go through each department again and say, maybe we can cut it?
That's up to you.
Or can we say just to you guys, cut the belt, cut 10% from each department?
Okay, so
And then
let's.
you come back with us and say, look, I wanna cut.
Okay, so
the
what you
chair,
see
the
before you,
silencer.
so back in October, November, December, the department has prepared a budget. They submitted it to Jeanette, Jeanette put it together. Jeanette and I then sat with every department head and went through it, and we cut that. And then we went through it again with the mayor, and we cut some other things. So what you see before you is our 0% budget. So we've already cut a lot from them. Obviously though, if you want to cut more, we can certainly do that. I guess we need to understand what number it is we're trying to get at.
That's an accurate statement. We've been working on this since the beginning of the year. But again, there are things in we, as a group, we accepted the skinny down budget requests from all the departments, and we haven't cut anything out of it. So I think there's an opportunity there to
Absolutely.
possibly cut back some more, to your point.
That's what I'm.
But it's not a wish list. I mean, the wish list was 6 months ago.
Yeah, this is a very whittled down wish list. I mean, if I were to give you, it would have been very thick. It would have been very thick.
So we appreciate you for doing what you guys do, but again, I'm only Rocco, I'm only one of
Yeah,
you guys. I think it should be cut a little more.
Okay.
I think we can tighten our belt a little more, and if you bring that back, cut a little bit here from each of the, I'm not saying making $1 million cut, but I'm saying if you can cut 10% from the capital budget.
And if that's the
give it
target, we
back
can,
to the-
absolutely.
If
If
I
that's the
hear
target.
Dr. Pascucci correctly, what is the capital budget right now?
Wait, can I just,
Please.
just so I can understand?
You're in charge, you're the CFO.
Yeah,
I'm, believe me,
Cut us
I'm
off,
not.
we're talking.
So, just to make it clear, what are we gonna cut? Because if we cut the capital, and whatever the governing body does, whatever you decide is fine, but cutting the capital is not going to impact taxes.
The ordinary budget, correct.
So,
So the entire capital budget, Rock, has a $300,000 impact on a $23 million budget. That's it.
For this year.
For this year, correct.
For this year.
For the-
But the capital will impact the budget in future years.
Well,
Years
right.
four.
well, so how it impacts the
We don't
budget?
spend it.
Just so we all understand how this correlates, right? So how it impacts the budget is the debt service payments we make. So our whole intent of all our planning and everything that we do is to have a flat debt service payment, right? So if we borrow too much money, then the required debt service payment can be very high, and then that would impact the budget. What I've tried to do is anticipating additional revenues that will be coming in, is increase the debt service payment that we're not necessarily required to make as much as I recommend that we make, but if we pay a little bit more, that money, the little bit of excess money, a couple $100,000, is bringing our, our total overall debt down quicker. And that's why we were able to pay off the debt from 2010 and the debt from 2011. So that's where we have to decide where we want to be. Do you want to make lesser debt service payments and in return pay higher interest amounts and lesser principal amounts?
Can we stop?
Yes.
All the hogwash, accounting stuff. I'm gonna borrow $6 million. At some point, I'm gonna pay that back. That's gonna affect someone.
Now, Brock, can we stop you right there, sir?
It's free money?
No. We're talking about setting aside capital for projects. We still don't have to bond for those projects. So we're gonna bond for our paving, but we may not bond for certain things that we can't agree on or we feel aren't necessary. So try not to get in the weeds here where,
No, I don't wanna be greedy, but
Okay.
shouldn't we be making the decision
on a capital number,
on the
yes.
capital number
Yes.
pick a number. Pick the field.
What is the number?
If
I asked
I
you
wanna
that.
spend $2.5 million on the field, I wanna know that now. I
Okay.
wanna spend it. Why do I have to wait and say, oh, I could spend it, I can't spend
And
it?
so Jeanette has done an analysis you guys have before you. One scenario is we borrow $3 million, and the other scenario is that we borrow $8 million. So it says debt analysis. If you'd like her to walk you through that, she can.
Why don't you?
Okay.
Jeanette, why don't you?
Really?
Yeah,
I mean, I have no problem doing it, but,
yeah.
okay. So,
Bella.
so the sheets before you, right, so it tells us what the current debt is, okay? And to Rocco, maybe to your point, your question specifically before I get through that, you know when you make your mortgage payment, right? So it's your monthly mortgage payment, whatever that number, maybe it doesn't have.
I have one now.
Okay, so whatever that payment is, and that's part of your monthly budget, right? So if you were gonna go buy a new house, or even a car, you're gonna, whatever that payment is, you're gonna need, you know what your monthly nut is, and you're gonna have X amount of dollars that you can spend towards your house or your car. The debt service, the debt payments that we make every year, it's the same process. That's how, if you take debt off and add more debt on, as long as that payment every month is the same or less, then you know you can afford to do it. And that's in a, the easiest way to explain it.
Right, but if I wanna buy a Porsche versus a Chevy,
Absolutely.
I'm gonna have more debt.
Well, the payment,
It's
you
gonna be
could,
the same.
well, so think about, now, well, think it right, because you could do the payment over 1 year, or you could do a payment over 15 years, right? So that's the policy decision, along with the items that you actually want to buy, just so we're on the same page.
Okay, we're on the same page.
Okay? So I put together it's,
What if
just a
scenario?
what-if scenario, please. So the current outstanding debt that we have is a total of nearly 28 million, and it's mixed of how we finance it, but at the end of the day, the number is 28 million that we're currently making payments on, okay? This year, we're gonna pay down, in principal, about $3 million, a little bit more than that. Any new debt that we incur, we have to decide how do we wanna fund it, right? So
Jeanette, real quick.
Yes.
So we're paying down $3 million in debt and all at different rates, correct?
Well, yes. All the short-term debt, all the debt that in fact, we're in the process of, because we have to renew it every single year. So everything that's in that amount, which is about $17.5 million, is at 2%. Any of the long-term debt, which is about it's actually, I guess if we add it all together, because open space is included in there, is about $10 million. That ranges in interest rates, from, I think we're all about 4%.
And our road program goes in short term?
Correct.
Jeanette's been using short-term for the past at least
Yeah.
5 years. So
Yeah.
everything that we borrowed has been short-term.
Because the interest
It's been
rates
so low.
have been so attractive. And that was the game plan, because quite honestly, our capital programs had been very small because, we were, the purse strings were tight.
Yep.
right? So at this point, we're trying to make up for the roads and all of that, make up for lost time that we weren't able to spend the money. And so now we have to decide what course of action do we want to take? And what I believe is the best course is a mixed, you don't want all short-term, you don't want all long-term, you want some kind of mix.
Jeanette,
Yes.
if we're retiring 3, and let's say we're taking out 6,
Right,
it's net 3 million.
correct.
If I use 2% as for argument's sake, for this particular, and I take $3 million at 2% over 20 years, and then I divide that by 5,600, it's $27 a household. So that's just to put the math in perspective. I fully support, going line by line item. That's why we have budget meetings with department heads and we go through it and recommendations. And I fully support Rocco's, continuance tightening of the belt. But if there is a meaningful project that made sense, that's the numbers. For every $1 million that we take out, it's about $9 for the average household. That's the factual math behind it. And that's assuming there's no other incremental revenue that would help,
Correct.
which I believe to be false.
But, so when we take out, we start the process in the note, right? We're
Right.
paying interest
You
on
have
the
to.
first 3 years. Then in year 4,
Right.
prevailing rates apply, correct?
No.
So we turn that into debt.
Okay, so you don't have to do that. After year 4, you have to make a payment.
Correct.
Okay? And at that point, it still rolls over, it can roll over 10 times. So in essence, you have a interest rate that fluctuates for 10 years. So just to put it in perspective, I know that the interest rates are clicking up, but 2 years ago, we were getting 0.5%. And that's why it was like, well, hey, we're going to stay on this path because it was, in essence, free money. And it's probably longer than that. It's probably for maybe 5-6 years that we've enjoyed that. Even at 2%, it's attractive. But the issue that's happening now is that the long-term rates and the short-term rates are starting to meet in the middle, so that the benefit to do the short-term, but the other issue is that you wouldn't want to roll it over into a bond until all the projects are complete, because then you can't pay it off early. So, it's all policy decisions, and I'm sure that once you come up with whatever it is that we, want to do, we'll come up with the best plan that's most advantageous to all, the residents and.
I did ask how much capital, what's the total capital that we were working through at this point that generated the $300,000? 6 points?
Yeah, so basically, we allocated 375,000, but I guess if we wanted to get down to you could probably chip off about 50,000 off of that number, because if we went with the capital that was in the plan, which was 6.8 million.
That's what I wanted, 6.8 million.
Yeah,
I just
so
want to go back to
you
Dr.
need
Pascucci. He's
Seven
asked us
and a
to
half.
trim somewhere. I don't know if you have a number in mind. I'd like to see that us get to for capital, but it's 6.8 million today.
Yeah, and so Mayor, the 375 allows us to borrow up to 7.5 million in capital.
Okay, thank you.
So if we trim that number, we could get down to.
And then I have another recommendation, for whatever it's worth. I have a forum, so I'm going to throw it out there so everybody hears. So if we were to take off 50,000, 100,000 off of that down payment money, I would not recommend that we reduce taxes with that money, because first of all, it wouldn't make, no resident would even, feel that they got a benefit from that.
18 cents.
It's exactly, thank you, Eric.
Could you
It's
say
8.
again, how much? Like Eric said, $9 on a house for $1
Mhm.
million, what would this do to a home?
Yeah, Eric.
It would be under a quarter.
A quarter, 25 cents?
Yes, yes.
See,
So-
listen, can I just,
Yeah.
one of the frustrating things, and I've heard it and I've read it, we all want lower taxes. No, but, and I think we don't agree on a lot of things. I think all 5 of us agree. We all want lower taxes. But you really need to understand the way the taxation of the municipality works. And the reality is, we are a 1/5 component of what you pay in your property taxes. We are 1/5 component of what you pay in your property taxes. The county is not gonna change. The library's not gonna change. The open space, unless we decide to change it, is not gonna change. And the school board is still 68% of that. So even if we were, Rocco, to do nothing, capital budget, zero, just say zero, and follow through with a cut, the average person would see virtually, maybe more than $1, but it would be insignificant to the vast, vast majority. I don't want to use the term that would be insensitive, but I'm going to say that it's just, unfortunately, that the amount of budgetary, that we actually control has an extreme limited impact on the average household.
And if I could put it in terms of numbers, so last year, yes, we had a flat tax, which was a wonderful thing, and I hope we can continue with that trend. But prior to that, probably for the 2 years prior to that, we did like a 1% increase. And that amounted to $18. So it was like $375,000 increase, say, and it amounted to an $18 increase per average assessed household. So the numbers that you would have to cut in order to have any real impact, it would be, a large number, and it would be detrimental to the, to the operations and the services of the town. So
if we cut, make it simple for me, we did nothing in the capital budget, zero. I'm not saying you can.
No.
What number would that be? How would that affect the?
So if you.
I don't want to put, not saying I don't want to do.
Yeah, so that we could take out the,
We could take out the down.
we could take, and it's gonna be about $18 a household.
For that, all of that.
That's it.
For $375,000, yes. No, but I mean, that's the reality of it, and so that's where we are. So, however you want to proceed is fine, but just to understand how the
It's
numbers.
less than a Medicare patient. Put it your terms on.
So Jeanette, Eric and I were here 7 years ago, right? We're going through and you were with us, right? The challenges and we were in that situation because of decisions that were made prior to us coming on the committee that created a significant amount of debt, right? That the town couldn't cover because we didn't have the revenue coming in to cover it.
Right, the biggest issue with the debt for that was the debt that was incurred in the open space fund. And the reason for that is because that's a flat tax, and it's hinged upon the assessed valuation of the town. So when the real estate market tanked, so did the revenue coming from the open space tax, which wasn't, so we weren't collecting enough to pay that.
The operational budget had to support that.
Yeah, so that was an additional $200,000-300,000
You had to
plus.
put it in your operating budget.
Plus the cut in state aid, that really hurt us as well.
Correct. So I guess I want to make sure that whatever we decide for this budget, capital overall,
Right.
that it's not going to put a liability on people in 7, 8 years from now.
Right.
It's different from the 5 of us up here, that they're in a situation where they can't pay the bill because of the decision we made.
Yeah.
Right? That's my biggest concern. So I want to make sure that you're comfortable in saying that the numbers that you're seeing with either scenario, you can support in year 1, year 5, year 10, until that debt is paid off.
So what I can tell you is that I looked at it from both sides. And if we're going to do a $7 or $8 million project this year, going forward for the next, handful of years, we have to be very conservative. And then we can reevaluate to see if, when that money starts rolling in, I'm still waiting for it. And then we can reevaluate to say other things that you want to do, whether you're going to pay cash, whether we're going to, so it is plausible to do this with no further impact, that we can sustain the payments that we need to make, and it's going to have no impact. But just understand that going forward for the next handful of years, we have to be conservative to,
And that's another good point Jen just made. We're putting money away so the future years we can use cash to pay for some of these things. We're not going to have to borrow maybe 5 or 6 years. So part of this also allows us to put some cash away.
Which, Don, as good as that is, it's also, to put it in layman's terms, you don't wait till you have 600,000 in the bank before you buy a house.
Sure,
Absolutely.
but it's
You,
still.
you wait till you have a proper down payment, right? So there's a balance. And I fundamentally agree with Greg in the sense that, you know, we want to be fiscally, want to have a vision that makes sense. But there's also another danger, and I'll use the roads for example. Having those 2 or 3 years that we did nothing for the roads has put tremendous pressure, because now, you know, how much do you spend each and every year to
That's what
kind
we're
of
trying to
catch up?
catch up. That's
How
why
much
last
do you
year-
spend each and every year to catch up with the sewers? And having a process in place, because waiting too long becomes more expensive from an infrastructure standpoint.
But Don,
And I don't want that to be created again by years forward, right, that we can't cover the payments, so we stop doing roads, right? And then we go, you know, learn from what we've done, or what was done in the past, not we, but we've kind of made up for it. And I just make sure that decisions we're making today are financially responsible, so whoever's here can continue to run the town efficiently.
But again, Jeanette, for the benefit of anybody who wasn't here in the past, you can only forecast what has been already collected in the past fiscal year 17 when it comes to pilot money.
Correct. I can only anticipate.
I'm sorry, anticipate. Unless leases are broken, unless sales of houses get reversed, the amount of money from the pilot
It's going to go up. It's gonna-
substantially.
Right, correct. I can't argue that.
Substantially, where we could quickly reduce some short-term debt if we don't, you know,
Right.
and I'm not saying that every year you spend $7-8 million, it's just,
Well, no, because
again,
we'd have to, of course, put the money away for a rainy day, so we don't have
course.
the lucid situation all over again with taxes. But yes,
Of course.
you're correct.
and one of those rainy days I'd like to possibly see put in the budget maybe is a legal defense fund for possible anticipated litigation, possibly from either utility companies, builders, developers, anything that we see coming down the line where we have, you know, we have a rainy day or a fund set aside for legal defense for our town. If we can find a way to do that.
Any other questions from the CFO? No.
Yes, ask away,
It's
please.
not right here. Those- It seems like you're saying that with this pilot program, and I don't have the words in your mouth, the odds are we're gonna be getting more money than we're realizing now.
Yes,
Substantial.
substantial, but it's a waiting game. You just don't know when it's going to happen.
So the odds are that if Rocco's still here.
it's not possible. It's not possible.
It's
It's not
just
possible.
when, it's not if, it's
Well,
when.
because let me give you some more fact. It's not like I'm hoping that the houses are sold. So I'm going to give you some examples. In the senior housing project that is part of a pilot, right now, there are 75, 76 sold. There are only about 20 that have actually taken possession. So that we're, and there might have been less than that, I don't know exactly, on December 31st. So those other 50 plus will move in this year. Even if you want to use an average of 15,000, which is what they'll pay, 15 times 50, it's 750,000 of perpetual pilot money. 750,000 that we don't account for today. That's just the seniors. I'm not even talking about the building. Some of the leases, all of the leases have a graduated scale, which will then perpetuate. So again, the possibility of it not happening is companies going out of business. The current health of each of those companies is extremely strong, at least the vast majority.
So then I don't
That's
have-
correct.
Sounds like I don't have to sweat it. If I'm worried about next year, we have to do
No.
a fire department or something, we got,
It's going to get easier, Rob.
Yeah, it's
really going to get easier.
all right, that's what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Rocco, we have actually a 30-year anticipated revenue that I could show you if you want to show us what we anticipate each year for the term of the 30 years.
I would like to face it.
Okay, absolutely. It's actually on the website.
Yeah, but those are just
Anticipated.
anticipated, so we're not, please.
Yeah, exactly, they're not.
You know, I get crazy when we talk about numbers.
Yes.
Mike, anything you'd like to add? You good, Rock, you good? Deputy Mayor Contempo?
So, based on that, and I guess the point Rocco made, the thought is that Rocco made a suggestion last meeting, right, to get a third-party independent to do an analysis of the town emergency services responses. should we put in capital emergency services, anticipating that if there's any needs for us? Because I guess my thought right now is there's tremendous growth on the southern side of town, right? Between the project Eric just mentioned, with 70 homes sold already. We have other projects in the area with homes going, and we have a lot of, we had, like we're telling you, the ribbon cutting today at another large tenant that came in the building, so the building's getting occupied. So there's a lot more traffic, a lot more visibility, which can generate a lot more accidents, homeowners. Anticipation, not knowing what the result is going to find of this survey, should we designate money for capital for emergency services in case we need to pull the trigger in 2018?
So now you're limited on the types of things that you can, use as capital. So when you say emergency services, what exactly do you mean by that? Because that would determine whether you put it in, the operating budget or the capital budget.
Either a vehicle,
Okay.
truck, or a building.
Okay, yeah, that's obvious.
Yeah.
Capital.
Yeah.
Those would be capital expenses.
So
You could
It's not that expensive, we can get it in.
You could, well, it is expensive, but you certainly could, it's not expensive to the, you can certainly add that in, and then,
we don't use it, we just,
and then we
Yeah,
won't
yeah.
borrow the money for it, we
Correct.
don't, you include it in an ordinance that will do, but if we don't need to borrow the money, we won't borrow that money.
Again, this is a capital plan.
Yep.
You're not actually allocating
Correct.
any until you actually go out to bond.
correct.
So let's say you want to build a firehouse.
So Donna,
And
please
it's
stop you
3 minute
there.
votes.
Could you take the mic and explain that in a little more detail so the public can hear that, about the plan, capital plan?
Sure, so the capital plan before you, that right now totals $6.8 million, is just the plan. In the plan are the requested items that all the departments have requested. When you decide what this number is going to be, you will then decide what it is you want to actually purchase. Once you decide that, quotes will be done, we'll get estimates, and then we'll bond for them. Once that bond ordinance is done, that's when the money's actually obligated. So you might have a capital plan of $6 million, you only spend $4 million next year. It depends on what you actually want to do. So you're not obligating any money, it's just a placeholder. And all Jeanette needed to know is how much money to put down as a down payment, so we have that in the operation budget in the event you decide to spend the entire capital budget.
Thank you, Donna.
You're
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
As many as you want.
Floor is
Give me
yours.
the last one.
Because this is your meeting.
I have one more question.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Let me ask mine first.
Okay.
So say we get our consultant in and he says, yeah, we do need a firehouse. Both says we don't need a firehouse. Both said we need professionals in the one firehouse we have. That would be personnel.
That's personnel, and that goes in the operating budget.
So suppose this is what happens and this is what we get from all our studies.
Okay.
Could we afford that or what would
So here's what I'm going to say. Right now, we're in almost May. The budget won't be adopted until June. By the time the study's done, we're maybe talking August, September. That's only 3 months we'd have to actually support in this budget. So we could certainly figure out something, absolutely.
Rocco, I do want to point out something, again, to allude back to what Greg said. When I first came aboard, we had 44 officers at the moment, and one of the police. I think we're down to 41 today, right? We got as low as 36. I think we're back to 40, 41. 42. One of the things that's not only putting extreme pressure on our town, but every town, is the public pension system. We are $135 billion in debt as a state, and I want to be perfectly clear. If you make $100,000 today, as a fireman, police, whatever, at $100,000, the theory is that we're each putting in 9 or 10%, depending on your union, towards that pension. Because of how underfunded we are, the actual cost right this second is 28%. So for every employee that you hire, you can do projects all day long. The healthcare cost and the pension cost is astronomical. I'm not saying I'm for or against it. I'm just saying that every time you add a head count, the healthcare cost is $35,000 to $40,000 per person. The pension is $35,000 to $40,000 in costs. So that is real costs that's how I think you're going to see real substantial problems.
Well, that's not, okay, I don't know if it's debate for today, but that's not what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was thinking they were gonna be per diems, not full-time employees, they would be per diem. So we wouldn't have to.
And we can talk about all that as we get down.
1099 everybody, I'm happy.
We can certainly do that.
I mean, I also, getting back to police, I see they have $2,000 in their budget for a McGruff suit.
Yes.
Can't we just put a hat on Rocco and?
I will run that by the chief. I'm sure he'll be fine with that.
Greg, you good?
Yeah, I think one of the line items that were in there, Jeanette put on, was anticipated legal expenses, right? I think that we need to increase that a little, because I think we missed one potential one.
We're talking about that.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
talking about offline.
yeah. I think small things just to kind of tweaking.
And we can see where since we're almost halfway through the year, we can see where we are. You know, we can have Jeanette run and see where we are and see what we need to increase.
I think
Absolutely.
we need just
Okay.
so we may not use it, but just I'd rather be,
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
have the access.
Better safe than sorry.
Just wanted to try to protect the town. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Nothing from Eric? Yes, Doc.
So what we were essentially saying, correct, that we're happy with what we got and we're gonna go forward with this budget? Is that what we're saying today?
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. So we're gonna open up to the public.
All right.
Well,
but-
no, I think I said we're going to tweak a couple things, right?
Couple things.
There's going to be potential capital for emergency services added, right? Not necessarily we're going to use it. I'm not sure the amount yet. I need to think about that, and I'll send the sheriff, Jeanette, and then let her run the numbers and see. I don't want to have any material impact, right? So it may be putting it in and reducing from another area. I don't want to increase. I prefer going down.
Just let us know what it is you want to add,
Yeah.
and we'll find a way to do it and keep the budget at 0%.
Okay.
So on that topic, we'd like to ideally introduce the budget Tuesday night. So
Right.
if you think that's something that we're all in favor of.
Right, as long as, like Greg said, we want to put some money into the legal defense fund, we want to have something in the capital for the fire department. Those are the two things I think we see, the only two things I see now, right?
And so the fire we can cover, if we're gonna hire personnel at the end of the year.
So we don't have to worry about that in the regular budget, but in the capital, we could put something.
Okay, so what?
If we don't spend it like we don't spend it.
Okay.
Hold on a second. If you're talking about capital for a firehouse, and we haven't identified a location, we haven't done any engineering, architecturals, I don't think that's gonna impact 2018 myself.
Wouldn't happen.
I'd probably
That
wait till
happens.
2019 for that, but
Yeah, so I'm not so sure that's necessary.
It could be truck related too, right? Then we may order a truck, but it may take, right, you expect a truck.
It takes a year.
Take a year or two.
Yeah,
So
And
we could
and
make.
so Dave Diarcy, when he spoke to us, they're not in need of a truck right now. And it takes like a year to build one anyways.
But that's why I think Rocco's independent third party, someone who has, no.
We're gonna do that.
No, you
Okay.
know.
It probably wouldn't be relevant. I'm just, but you could budget.
Just one blank.
Okay.
My point, Greg, is just, if we're talking about wrapping things up in the next 24 hours, we're not gonna really have an opportunity to have an opportunity to do that.
I
don't think it's gonna impact the capital. If a truck takes a year to build, it won't impact the capital
Well,
in 2018.
we could keep the number the way it is, and what this actual number ends up can change. Like this is again a planning document. We can spend $6.8 million on roads if you wanted to. You know, it doesn't have to be divvied up the way it's divvied up.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
We'll
Okay.
decide.
So this is our capital money, and we spend it how you all determine.
Understood.
And you're comfortable that, you know, Vaughn, that if we stay with this capital number, that we can not get into a situation where we're gonna be,
But next year, this number can't be this high.
it can't be recurring things, is what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so then also, yes, understand that whatever changes that you decide on is gonna have me change this document, and today's Thursday, and likely this information probably isn't gonna get to me till Monday, and the meeting's on Tuesday. So if we're looking to introduce, then, I mean, you know, all I do is work miracles for the Township of Holmdel, and I
Appreciate
love
it.
doing that for you, but just understand that that's, because then this document has to be altered, and then it has to be, you know, put out to the public, so I don't
So
want to
what-
get beat up next week.
So what you're saying is.
Because they didn't have the document
You
in
may
time.
not be able to deliver any revised budget to us until Monday.
Well, she's in need guidance as to what the revisions are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
But we're
so you're not
talking
gonna
about-
have it until the 11th hour,
But we're also
so
talking about really.
it's not
insignificant-
substantially gonna change, but I just want to make that known
But
right
you'll-
now.
You'll
that-
be able to explain to us
The change.
very easily what the minor
Absolutely.
changes are.
Absolutely.
For legal defense, for instance.
If you give me the numbers, I'll put them in, and then I'll be able to tell you where they are, and,
I think we're close.
okay?
If there's no other questions from the committee at this time, I'd like to open it up for public comment. Okay? Anyone from the public care to speak tonight? Okay. I didn't see you come in, you were slouched down.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He
I
hides now.
wanted to go home and change and I didn't get to. J and L 18 Lavender Drive. Eric, your point is well taken on the cost per household for, say, the $3 million. In the coming years, I know there's a 30-year schedule. We've seen it before on the pilot programs. There is a material rise in revenues coming from that if the companies are healthy. And that could be debatable on some of them. But that has a different equation than what you said before. This amount goes to the municipality, this amount goes to the town, Monmouth County and the school. That's like pure heroin, pure money coming into the township.
It's 95% versus
Yeah.
the typical 15%.
And what everyone really needs to keep, I was at meetings this past week at Preserve Holmdel and CILU, and we wrote about this. People really want that 95% to go toward, obviously, wise investments, but reducing taxes, whether that's reducing short-term debt, retiring long-term debt, if it's at all feasible. So we need, well, you're making, can I pause?
I'm not making a face, no.
But
I'm actually just
that doesn't go to your dollar per household. That's real money coming, 95%.
So, I don't disagree with you,
Okay.
but at the end of the day, let's go with my projection that in 6 years, that you have $2.5 million from the senior homes and $5 million, so it's $7.5 million of revenue annually that the town would see today that, that would see that it doesn't see today.
Yeah.
So that's $7.5 million less that you need to ask less of the residents.
Yes.
Okay, so that I believe will happen. What I can't predict is the cost of pension and health care and each employee, and those costs will never go.
Okay. I just want.
I'm sorry, Jay, can I
Sure.
just add something to this conversation? Because this is a very, very important conversation to have. Please understand that when this windfall comes, whenever it does, that we cannot use all of that money you have to
Right,
put
sinking
some
fund.
away.
So in a sinking
Because-
fund, otherwise, 30 years from now, the governing body gets up here and they'll go, whoa, where's all this money? Because eventually, the pilot goes away.
Because that's
So
kind of what
about
happened.
12.5% of, right, isn't it what we said? What?
10. Right.
12.5% of all the revenue goes into a sinking fund. That will,
Correct.
so it's not 100% all
Yeah, so
of
I
ours.
think
You
that
do have to be
you'll see-
fiscally responsible for the perpetuity of the town.
But after the 30-year pilot, you would hopefully roll into traditional tax.
Well, no, that's what will happen, and then we'll be
It-
back to the.
It is, Jay, but
Well, and then we might be at, so right now, we're at 17%, say, of,
Right.
that's what the town gets. I'm sure you're gonna see relief.